a couple of announcements for those of you who still haven't gotten it figured out. First of all, welcome. Thank you once again for giving us part of your sunshine on a Tuesday. I want to remind you that tomorrow at 9 o'clock in 2015 Schultz, we will be showing Into the Arms of Strangers. Shatay's going to start the film. I will be there. One of the things we're going to do today is hand out the final. And so if you have any questions, you can ask them tomorrow. Then we're going to do the next showing at 4 o'clock on Thursday, same time, same place, different time. And that is from 4 to 6:15. We're going to hand out the final exam today. If Barbara hasn't caught you yet, she does have some papers. Do you have some left to hand back? That's all my notes. Now I want to tell you that we have a special treat. Our speaker has some connections to two of the sociology faculty. She and Andy Roth worked together as colleagues at Pomona College, and the person who's going to introduce her, James Dean, was her undergraduate student at Claremont? Pomona College. So I'm going to have James has the honor of introducing our speaker today, Lynn Rappaport. Okay, James.
So on behalf of the 23rd Annual Sonoma State University Holocaust Lecture Series, it is my great pleasure to present Lynn Rappaport. Professor Rappaport is professor of sociology at Pomona College and an expert on the Holocaust, Genocide, and cultural sociology. Her talk today, entitled Hollywood's Holocaust, Schindler's List and the Construction of Memory, is an excellent example of her current research interests in how the Holocaust is portrayed in popular culture, ranging from its depiction in movies, TV, comic strips, as well as other mediums. Moreover, today's talk builds on Professor Rappaport's incisive analysis of the Holocaust as a practice of collective memory that shapes, constrains, and continues to organize Jewish and non-Jewish life today. In her book, Jews in Germany After the Holocaust, Memory, Identity, and Jewish-German Relations, she lucidly illustrates how everyday interactions create and recreate the collective memory of the Holocaust today, illustrating that no aspect of German social life is untouched by this event, whether it is in definitions of citizenship, the formations of friendship, or relations of love and intimacy. She demonstrates that Jewish German individuals continue to negotiate the pain, tragedy, and indelible memory of this event. And I feel fortunate to have her here today to share her thoughts with us, as Lynn was my undergraduate advisor and an inspiring role model who cemented my decision to become a sociologist. So now, without further ado, let me present Professor Lynn Rappaport.
Can you hear me? I'd like to thank Myrna for inviting me, and Andy Roth and James Dean for being excited about me being here. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to meet all of you wonderful students and members of the community. Can you hear me okay? Good. One day in 1980, a well-known Australian writer, Thomas Keneally, visited a leather goods store in Beverly Hills, California, to inquire about the prices of briefcases. Amidst the shelves of imported Italian leather goods, Keneally met the store owner, Leopold Pfefferberg. Pfefferberg, who goes by the nickname Poldik, is a Czech Jew who changed his name to Leopold Page after the war. He is a friendly man who likes to get to know his customers. He asked Keneally what he did for a living. "A writer," Keneally replied. "A good one?" asked Poldick. "Some think so," he answered. "In any case, I make a living out of it." "Then I have a story for you for the theme of a book," said Poldick. It was through this chance encounter that Keneally first heard of Oskar Schindler, as Poldick was a Schindler survivor. Drawing on interviews with 50 Schindler survivors who were wartime associates and friends of Schindler, and many testimonies deposited at Yad Vashem by Jews saved by Schindler, as well as visiting locations with Poldick that figure prominently in the book, Keneally uses the texture and devices of a novel to tell a true story. I have attempted, however, to avoid all fiction, since fiction would debase the record, and to distinguish between reality and the myths which are likely to attach themselves to a man of Oscar's nature, writes Keneally. It has sometimes been necessary to make reasonable constructs of conversations of which Oscar and others have left only the briefest record. But most exchanges and conversations and all events are based on the detailed recollections of the Schindler Juden, Schindler Jews, of Schindler himself, and of other witnesses to Oscar's acts of outrageous rescue. Sidney Sheinberg, president of MCA, purchased the screen rights to Keneally's book, believing it was a perfect vehicle for his protege, Steven Spielberg. Steve Zaillian wrote the screenplay, and it would take 10 years before Spielberg began shooting the film. "I didn't go to work on it right away because I didn't know how to do it," he said in a televised interview. "The story didn't have the same shape as the other films I have made. It is certainly not an entertaining story in the way I make entertainment. It was something that didn't come naturally for me. I also needed time to mature within myself and develop my own consciousness about the Holocaust. I had to wait until a time when I really felt I was able to express myself on the subject of Oskar Schindler and make a very serious movie about his life and deeds." When Schindler's List opened in only a few select theaters around the country, it grossed slightly less than $1 million in its first weekend. The film went on to win 7 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Picture, to gross a total of $95 million in the United States and over $221 million at foreign box offices, not including video sales. An estimated 25 million Americans saw the film. When Schindler's List had its television debut on NBC on Sunday, February 23, 1997, an estimated 65 million viewers watched the film. It had by far the biggest audience of any non-sports program on television that season, and according to Nielsen Media Research, 34% of the homes watching television that night were tuned to Schindler's List. By using Schindler's List as an example and comparing the book to the screenplay and the film, I would like to present some of the controversies surrounding whether it is appropriate to deal with the topic of the Holocaust in popular culture. How does one create a film based on the Holocaust and make it both morally just and marketable? More generally, what is the role of popular culture in political and social life, and how does it serve the interests of Holocaust education? Theoretically, I'm interested in the relationship and the productive tension between history, memory, meaning, and representation. What exactly is memory, and how is it articulated in the metaphors and images of drama, fiction, poetry, song, film, monuments, museums, photographs, commemoration ceremonies, diaries, testimonies, and other cultural artifacts? What are the particular meanings or representations inherent in these objects of the past? And how do they uncover truths about the contours of particular social world and historical traditions? Moreover, what is the relationship between the past and the present? Is the past something that really exists at a discrete moment in time and thus shapes the present? Or might the past be something that actually exists in the present when we use memory to think and imagine things that existed in the past? How does individual memory relate to collective memory, or I prefer to use the term collective memories, the various memories that exist in our culture that might be active, prominent, or contested at any given time. What groups and societies choose to remember is a political question, just as much as what they choose to forget. And societies create their own memories that can be manipulated based on current political, cultural, and/or social interests. Nowhere else is this tension between memory, history, representation, and meaning more politically and morally charged than in questions of Holocaust representation. Its necessity, its possibility, its implications, and its limits. Can the Holocaust be represented? And if so, how? Who has the legitimacy to tell the story, and within which medium? Is there one story or many stories, and how do these stories converge or diverge and ultimately impact the way we view and understand this traumatic past? Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel insists that the Holocaust cannot be represented because he argues that whoever has not lived through the event can never know it, and whoever has lived through the event can never fully reveal it. He calls for a taboo on Holocaust representation, as words are simply insufficient to describe the enormity and uniqueness of the event, and images cannot convey the unimaginable. There is no such thing as Holocaust literature. There cannot be, Wiesel argues. Auschwitz negates all literature as it negates all theories and doctrines. To lock it into a philosophy is to restrict it. To substitute words, any words, is to distort it. A Holocaust literature, the very term, he argues, is a contradiction. Nevertheless, the taboo on Holocaust representation has been violated repeatedly by the numerous depictions that have appeared in film, television, novels, and testimonies. For example, the survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation has videotaped more than 50,000 survivors who have told their experiences in 33 languages in 57 countries. While each survivor's account can only provide a segment of truth, as many of the most courageous victims perished, each individual story is certainly a piece of the puzzle. Perpetrators, too, have told their stories in diaries, letters, memoirs, trial testimonies, and now there are some films. Presenting the Holocaust through literature has also been difficult, given the enormity of the event. Yet the Diary of Anne Frank, Jerry Kaczynski's The Painted Bird, Art Spiegelman's Pulitzer Prize-winning Mouse, Elie Wiesel's Own Night, among other memoirs, have been published and well received, making increasingly doubtful Wiesel's assertion of unrepresentability. Edward Easter has pointed out that despite the difficulties of Holocaust representation, over 150 plays about the Holocaust have been produced in the United States, Europe, and Israel. Critics have found it particularly troubling when the Holocaust has been represented in popular culture. Filmmakers, novelists, poets, painters, composers, and others have been wrestling with the possibility or the impossibility of treating radical evil in art. Adorno's notion that there cannot be any art after Auschwitz and Sartre's notion of the impossibility of receiving pleasure from work based on the Holocaust are particularly relevant regarding popular culture. Popular culture is entertainment, and in Theodore Adorno's terms, entertainment is betrayal. For Adorno, after Auschwitz, there could be no poetry, since deriving pleasure from the artistic representation of pain is disagreeable and dishonorable, and ultimately might blur the distinction between victim and perpetrator. Sartre likewise reasoned that turning mutilated bodies, racked and tortured into something beautiful, would, for the sake of art, betray the victim's anger and grief. In the United States, there is also growing concern regarding the Americanization of the Holocaust, resulting in a violation of its sacredness and thus increasing its trivialization. Some argue that the Holocaust has become an industry and the show business, like show business, is turning the Holocaust into kitsch. There is a Holocaust cookbook. The Mengele twins have appeared on Geraldo, and Holocaust survivors have appeared as celebrities on shows like Oprah, Sally Jesse Raphael, etc. Films like The X-Men and Chicken Run incorporate Holocaust themes. There is a rap group called Concentration Camp that has an album entitled The Holocaust. What does it mean when Elie Wiesel throws the ceremonial first pitch of the New York Mets 1998 home season? Even Superman has traveled back in time to Nazi-occupied Poland, and once realizing the extent of the Nazis' depravity, has declared war on them. Superman's job is going to be bringing down this Third Reich, he says in one thought balloon. And I'm actually doing some research right now on these Superman comic books. I brought you a couple of them. These came out in the 1990s. It came out during the decade of Schindler's List and when the Holocaust Museum opened up. And here you see, I'm going to be talking about Schindler's List in a minute, but I just want you, I'm going to pass these around, to look at the cover of the image of this Superman comic book, where you see a little girl in a red outfit, which kind of resembles the little girl in the red coat from Schindler's List, which I'll be talking about later. But here, Superman goes back into time to Warsaw, Poland, to rescue Jews. So there are two of them here. So we'll just pass them around.
One way.
Moreover, Holocaust museums in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Houston, Florida, and in other U.S. cities are popular tourist sites. In St. Petersburg, Florida, for instance, the Visitors Bureau lists 40 fun things to do in their city with Remember the Holocaust listed as number 7. Tourists are invited to visit the local Holocaust Museum, where for $39.95 they can purchase a scale model replica of a Polish boxcar once used by the Nazis to transport Jews and others to the concentration camps. Or for a minimum museum donation of $5,000, they receive a genuine spike from Treblinka that's preserved in lucite. So these are commodities now that you can buy, like souvenirs. I wanted to mention another project briefly that I had worked on a couple of years ago, which is a whole industry of Holocaust pornography that emerged in the 1970s, where the Holocaust and concentration camps were being used as sites for, let's say, sexual antics between prisoners and guards. And one film that created a lot of notoriety, and I did a paper on it, was called Ilsa Wolf of the SS. And it took place in a concentration camp, and Ilsa was this Nazi commandant, and she made the prisoners have sex with her, and if they didn't satisfy her, she castrated them. And this Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, was actually re-released in DVD in 2000. I think it won the best porno film award for whatever the awards are in that industry. And I had a couple of students working with me on it, and since I live in Los Angeles, the pornography industry is very popular there, and we were able to track down the director, a couple of the actors in the film, and actually the woman who starred as Ilsa. And she's now in her 70s. She lives in Las Vegas. She goes by her married name, and she's now a Protestant minister. So you have a complete turnaround But you have a whole industry that started in the 70s where they were using concentration camps as kind of the stage or the background or setting for this pornography that kind of took off. And we can talk about that later in the discussion. Anyway, what are the moral, political, and social implications of various ways of representing and understanding the Holocaust, particularly for Americans that are unconnected to these events? How has our culture created retellings of this event in ways that are significant to major ethical concerns in American society? Since most Americans have not experienced the Holocaust, their knowledge of it comes from how it is represented. And since popular culture reaches a far broader audience than scholarly works, I believe it's important to study popular culture. Even the Superman comic books that I'm passing around are really representations and narratives that are created by our culture that tell a Holocaust story. Schindler's List has been the most widely successful and watched film on the Holocaust to date. I ask, to what extent does this film reflect an understanding of the Holocaust or actually produce one? I want to show some clips now that I want the sound to be muted because I'm going to just talk a little bit about them, and I think I need to get ready because I need a light on here. So somebody showed me the light, but I don't remember how to turn it on. How do I turn it on? What button? Oh, this button here. Okay. Okay, there are going to be some clips. Hopefully it'll be muted. I'm going to start here. It'll follow. It'll catch up.
Wait.
Hollywood films follow a conventional formula. They summarize what will take place within a film in the first and last 5 minutes. For instance, the film opens with a flick of a match as candles are lit. Light struck against darkness is a metaphor for memory, as in the lighting of the yahrzeit candles. The camera focuses on the flames burning brightly and a family gathered around a table. It is not a yahrzeit prayer that is being chanted, but rather Sabbath prayers. We are in a Jewish home in Eastern Europe before the war, and it is Friday night. The scene is shot in color. We watch the candles slowly burn down, depicting the passing of time. Now it is daylight, the house is empty, and we witness the flames burning out. The human absence and the burning of the flame are metaphors for the end of Jewish life and culture. While pre-war Jewish life is colorful, its flame of life slowly burns out. The smoke from the burnt-out candle flame blends into the smoke churning from a train. We hear the sound of the train before we see it, even though it's muted. The film shifts into black and white. We recognize the train as the symbol of the Holocaust. The two-color scheme suggests a mediated reality, 2 levels of time and order. The colored world seems like a brighter overlay, hiding the horror of the human condition exposed by the Holocaust. The black and white footage and the use of handheld cameras gives the film a documentary character, similar to World War II Army newsreels that originally exposed Holocaust atrocities. The black and white footage also symbolizes the bleakness of the war years. The transition from color to black and white serves as a bridge from the prologue to the story proper. Title cards give tidbits of historical information throughout the film, creating a sense that what we are witnessing is real. For instance, the first title card informs the viewers that the story begins after the Germans invaded Poland. There are also numerous symbolic repetitions at various points throughout the film. There are 2 repetitions of shots of color appearing against black and white footage. One is of a little girl in a red coat, which I will speak about later, and the other occurs late in the film when Schindler asks a rabbi who is working in his factory what day it is. The rabbi says he doesn't know, and Schindler tells him it's Friday and he should be getting ready for the Sabbath. The scene shows the lighting of the candle flames. The flames begin in color, perhaps to symbolize the rebirth of Jewish life once again. We are also, throughout the film, hearing people call out their names, followed by close-up camera shots of the names being typed on a manual typewriter onto a list. This repetitive technique appears at various points throughout the film as Jews are continually being registered for work, for deportation, or for Oskar Schindler. Seeing people give only their names and having close-ups of the names being typed or of lists not only illustrates the bureaucracy of the war, but also the tension between memorialization and erasure. Like the Vietnam War Memorial, this technique of lists of names both personalizes and demonstrates the enormity of the atrocities in the face of annihilation. One can also analyze close-ups, camera angles, the introduction of music, and other aspects of film technique, but due to time constraints, I'd like to turn to the narrative. Feature films tell stories about how we construct and make sense of our world. Characters serve as stable, constant elements in a narrative, independent of how and by whom they are filmed. Their actions constitute the fundamental components of a tale. Archetypes help personify major issues in a story, and Steven Spielberg has been described as the ultimate storyteller. In the pop ethos of Hollywood fantasy, Spielberg introduced us to the ultimate hero, Indiana Jones. In Jaws, we were frightened by the ultimate monster, the shark. The film E.T. endeared us to the ultimate alien, childlike, helpless, and lovable E.T. Spielberg combines these archetypes in Schindler's List by providing an archetypical hero, Oskar Schindler, a movie monster, Nazi Eamon Goeth, and the ultimate alien, the Jews. The audience bears witness to the story of Oskar Schindler, a Sudeten German businessman, bon vivant, and womanizer who joins the Nazi Party, moves to Krakow during the war, and acquires an enamelware factory that manufactures pots and pans for use by German troops. Jews provide a ready supply of cheap labor. Schindler finds himself quickly annoyed by Nazi interference with his workforce, the Nazi harassment of his Jews, the summary executions, the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto, and their forced removal into labor camps. In the course of the war, he is transformed from war profiteer, business entrepreneur, and Nazi sympathizer to rescuer, righteous Gentile hero. The story of Oskar Schindler is one story of the Holocaust which occurs obviously within the context of the Second World War. In Keneally's book, the Second World War is drawn out much more prominently than in Spielberg's film, as we read about battles, new policies, Adolf Hitler, and the progression of the war. In the movie, there are no battle scenes. Instead, the movie focuses exclusively on the story of Oskar Schindler and his deeds during the war, with much less mention of Hitler, World War II, other major characters, both Jewish and German, and the overall social and historical context being less prevalent. In Spielberg's Holocaust, the major struggle is personified between the hero Oskar Schindler and the movie monster villain Nazi Eamon Goeth, the commandant of the Plazau labor camp. In both book and film, Schindler represents good personified, Goeth represents evil. While in the book the contrast is not as strong, in the film, Schindler and Goeth are constructed as binary opposites who struggle over the lives of their Jews. In the book, we are introduced to a wide array of Nazi officials who cover a spectrum of positions toward Nazism and toward Jews, some at various times even showing acts of sympathy toward Jews. As Christopher Browning has documented, Nazis in the police battalions were basically ordinary men following orders. In the film, however, Goeth represents the Nazi machinery personified. He is evil, unidimensional, and all the Nazi characters in the book are collapsed into Goeth as he becomes our 20th century official Nazi movie monster. Goeth's theme is annihilation. He is a thug, corrupt, and psychopathic. We see him lounging shirtless on his balcony, entertaining himself by randomly shooting Jews. He makes love to a German woman and immediately thereafter pees into the toilet, as if expunging himself of anything tender or human. He speaks in a menacing Austrian accent, delights in cruelty, and shudders at his attraction for his Jewish housekeeper, Helen Hirsch. In the book, by the way, his relationship with Hirsch is more brutal and not sexualized. In the film, he beats Helen out of frustration of being unable to consummate a sexual attraction toward her. We first meet Goethe as he arrives in Krakow to set up the Plaszow labor camp. As he is in the process of selecting a maidservant, Helen Hirsch, from the shivering Jewish women, a commotion breaks out in the background between an SS officer and a Jewish woman. The woman is a construction engineer with a degree from the University of Milan. She insists that the barracks are bound to collapse because they are not being built properly. Goethe turns to the SS officer and calmly tells him on his authority to shoot her, then and there. Goethe is informed that they really need her, to which he insists that she be killed anyway. Goethe has no reservations about having murdered in full view, and he expresses his special hatred for... Excuse me, I can't find the... I think I pressed something by accident. My light went out. Which one is it? Sorry, it's this top one here. Right here. Sorry about that. Goethe is informed that they really need her, to which he insists that she be killed anyway. Goethe has no reservations about having murdered in full view, as he expresses his special hatred for educated Jews just like Karl Marx. He is cold-blooded and evil, demonstrating how irrational annihilation took precedent over rational exploitation. Social scientists try to understand human behavior. We ask questions regarding what motivates individuals to choose one course of action and reject another. We also try to understand why people persist in their behavior, even in the face of adversity. Keneally and Spielberg cannot tell us what motivated Goethe to callously kill Jews, nor what motivated Schindler to rescue them. Goodness and badness for both of them are just inherent in human nature. Goethe remains evil throughout the film. In the book, Schindler is always sympathetic to the Jews and does not go through the type of character transformation that Spielberg portrays. You can actually put the lights back on now. In the film, when we first meet Schindler, he cares mostly about business. He wants to rationally exploit the Jews, but his conscience is awakened and his compassion grows during various points throughout the war, as depicted in the film. We are led to believe that the change occurs when Schindler, out for a horseback ride with his lady friend, witnesses from a hill above town the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto. I think you saw that scene. The camera focuses on a little girl in a red coat. The visual device of the red coat, the only shot of color on a black and white film, catches our eye. As spectators, we witness Schindler's emotional response. We see him viewing the clearing of the ghetto with consternation and disbelief. The little girl becomes a visual metaphor representing the Jews, or the universal victim, childlike and female, thus innocent, passive, and powerless. In the book, the girl has a name, Genya, and she is older than the child in the film. The turning point for Schindler is completed later in the film as we watch as Schindler notices her being carted away in a pile of corpses. His physical proximity to the little girl is much closer, only a few feet away, depicting, perhaps, that he is emotionally closer to the issues at hand. The eye-catching violation of her red coat against the black and white film is laden again with a more substantive message. She is a reference point. Schindler realizes he must act soon or Jews will die, and thus he begins to purchase them. We, as spectators, are watching the rescuer. We are seeing the world through his point of view. We are witnessing his visual experience and participating in his subjectivity. We know more than he does, as we know the history and the outcome of the story. Yet he grabs our attention precisely because he is in action, moving and transforming instead of awaiting and enduring. While Schindler and Goethe are portrayed as binary opposites, there are also certain parallels. They both drink wine, admire women, consider the profits of the war machine, and help each other out of binds with the German bureaucracy. In the book, we learn that they both have similar Roman Catholic backgrounds and similar educations. Spielberg's camera juxtaposes the two. I think you saw those shots. Shaving, looking down on fallen victims, Goethe gazing from the balcony, Schindler from atop of the hill, overlooking the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto, and their interactions with Helen Hirsch and the women in general. The Jews in Schindler's List are irrelevant to the major drama, except that they are the object that is fought over. In the book, Itzhak Stern does not play as prominent a role in the story, and there are other Jews who have significant relationships with Oskar Schindler. The story thus becomes simplified in the film, and Stern, as Schindler's right hand, comes to embody Schindler's relationship to the Jews that he saves. The rest of the Jews portrayed in the film are fairly nondescript. They appear as anonymous figures or stereotypes. The men are depicted in money deals and other sorts of scheming, the women as temptresses and seductresses. Stern, the only Jewish character developed at any length, is a professional bookkeeper whose expression throughout the film rarely changes. In the contest between the two, it is Schindler who prevails and who at the film's end is properly the recipient of the rescued Jews' gratitude, respect, and love. Through the icon of a gold ring, remember they give him a gold ring, the Schindler Juden in effect marry themselves to this man out of heartfelt gratitude for his righteous deeds. This is the only scene in the film where Schindler loses his composure and breaks down, and while the camera angle on Schindler throughout the film was shot looking up at him, the camera in this scene is the only time when the camera is actually looking down on him. And in the final cemetery scene, which you saw, the camera pans over the crosses in Jerusalem's Latin cemetery, coming to rest on the grave sites where Schindler himself is buried. The film is now in color again, and these same Jews walking with their families and the actors who portrayed them pay their respects to the memory of their Savior through the ritualistic placing of tokens of honor and love on his grave. Both scenes convey tender feelings of affection, respect, and reconciliation, and bring to culmination the career of a man who, however flawed in character, is nothing short of a saintly hero. Spielberg reminds us with a title card of historical information that over 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. Yet is the audience moved to tears over the death of 6 million Jews, or are they crying over the death of Oskar Schindler? Is Schindler's List a story about Oskar Schindler, or is it a story about the Holocaust? Can it be both, or is crossing this boundary problematic? Moreover, what is the relationship between fact and fiction? While the book won the Booker Prize in Fiction, Keneally refers to it as faction, an historical novel. Indeed, the copyright page of a recent edition states the standard disclaimer. This book is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events or locales or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Steve Zaillian, the screenwriter, and Steven Spielberg take excerpts from the book, recreate the scenes, many of which are out of chronological order, collapse the Nazi war machine into a movie monster, the Jews into the character of Itzhak Stern, and have Schindler represent a semblance of hope. People who see Spielberg's film might leave thinking they've witnessed or somehow know the story of the Holocaust, or at least that of Oskar Schindler. While Schindler's List is indeed based on a true story, does the audience forget about its fictionalized dramatization when movie reviewers portray the film as a dramatic true account of a German industrialist, a feature film of a true story, or the true story of a war profiteer? People who see Spielberg's film might leave thinking they have witnessed or somehow know the story of the Holocaust, and they might forget that Amblin Entertainment are the first words depicted on the screen as the film begins. Spielberg uses his prodigious movie-making skills to put you inside the horror of the Holocaust, writes one film critic. What Spielberg has done in this Holocaust story is simply and forcefully place us there, in Krakow, in the ghetto, writes another. Comparing Schindler's List to Claude Lanzmann's Shoah, Spielberg himself said, "I recreated these events and then I experienced them as any witness or victim would have." It is reported that he instructed his cast, "We're not making a film, we're making a document." Kaminsky, the cinematographer, confirmed, "The newsreel quality of the black and white seemed to fade the barriers of time, making the footage feel like an ongoing horror that I was witnessing firsthand. I think I can speak for the whole crew when I say the experience was sobering." Most significantly, Schindler's List is a happily ever after story. It is a story of rescue and survival, which is not the story of the Holocaust. It is a story of Germans saving Jews, at least the Jews one comes to care about in the movie. Even the anti-hero Eamon Goeth saves Helena. There is an uplifting Hollywood ending. Some 1,100 Jews on Schindler's List survive. Eamon Goeth is punished, and Jewish survivors immigrate to Israel. The film's slogan, "The list is life," is the complete opposite of the most typical Jewish Holocaust experience, which is execution, starvation, and death. The film de-emphasizes the most important aspect of the Jewish Holocaust, genocide. The film does not focus on death, dying, or genocide. It is only in the final caption that the title card mentions that 6 million Jews perished. What message is given to future generations by putting a redemptive spin on history's darkest years? How troubling is it to rely on Schindler's List as a vehicle for educating younger generations and for creating and preserving a public Holocaust memory? What impact does a fictionalized version of history have on our understanding of history and our consciousness? Oprah Winfrey, U.S. television's most popular talk show host, declared on national television that the mere act of watching Schindler's List has made her a better person, and she went on to chastise her audience for not having made time to see it. Christopher Mealy, who watched the movie Schindler's List for the first time in 1966, said that the film inspired him to rescue the historical ledgers and documents that a Swiss bank was about to shred that provided evidence of Swiss involvement with Nazi Germany. And in August 1999, J. Lawrence Keshner, a circuit judge in Madison County, Illinois, ordered 4 men who burned a cross in a black family's yard to watch movies such as Schindler's List and participate in a racial awareness program in lieu of a prison sentence. What role should popular culture play in telling Holocaust stories? Films based on true events might fictionalize them in order to produce drama, to telescope time, to avoid being filled up with too many minor characters, or simply to be more entertaining. Feature films are also commercial endeavors with commercial interests. Given box office dependence on sex, violence, a simple plot, easy laughs, and a happy ending to sell a film, what happens when popular culture, mass consumption, and entertainment intersect with telling a story about the Holocaust? Lawrence Barron calculates that since 1945, the corpus of Holocaust feature films worldwide totals nearly 500 movies. Likewise, and While America Watches, Jeffrey Chandler traces the numerous representations of the Holocaust or Holocaust-related material that have appeared on American television since 1945. In Remembering to Forget, Barbie Zelazar shows that since 1945, our visual depiction of the Holocaust in photographs has become increasingly simplified. Only a handful of images have been produced and reproduced in newspapers and the mass media and thus become reinforced in our minds. Is there a sacredness about the Holocaust that commercializing it or popularizing it ends up trivializing it, making it part of that show business, so to say. And who is to declare what is considered a trivialization? Now we can even ask whether there are trivializations of the film Schindler's List. For example, while East German Katharina Witt and American Paul Wiley were each praised independently for ice skating to Schindler's List at various national and international competitions, France's synchronized swimming team won a gold medal in bad taste when their sports minister, Guy Drutt, forced them to scrap a routine that they planned on performing for the 1996 Summer Games in Atlanta. Wearing black bathing suits and set to the music from Schindler's List, the synchronized swimmers were to goose step in German military style before plunging into the pool and reenact the arrival of Jewish women to death camps, the selection of Nazi doctors, and their final march to the gas chamber. This was scrapped. Why is ice skating to Schindler's List considered more legitimate than synchronized swimming? The mass media are a central vehicle for teaching new generations about the Holocaust. Feature films play a particularly prominent role in this endeavor since they are so widely distributed, so widely viewed, and easily digested. Indeed, the 1994 American Jewish Committee survey on what Americans know about the Holocaust found that twice as many Americans gain their knowledge about the Holocaust from television and movies than from books. For example, while 43% of adults questioned reported gaining their knowledge about the Holocaust from books, 58% reported that they learned it from television, and 33% gained it from movies. When films such as Schindler's List appear on television, the viewing impact is even more dramatic. The gap that exists grows wider every year between things as they were in the camps and things as they are represented by the current imagination, fed by books, films, and myths, writes Italian chemist Primo Levi in The Drowned and the Saved. He calls on the academic community to monitor Holocaust representations to prevent them from sliding towards stereotypes and simplifications. While Holocaust museums and representations in music and television have certainly increased people's awareness of the Holocaust, whether it has increased their understanding of the event is another question. For instance, a 1998 U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum survey found that 79% of respondents knew that millions of Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, yet 19% did not believe that this happened during the Second World War, and another 19% were not sure. In conclusion, I must leave you with more questions than answers. In my own research, I hope to analyze how the Holocaust has been portrayed in popular culture over the course of 5 decades, depicting changes in its representation and meaning. While I believe its representation tells us something about the Holocaust, it also tells us something about ourselves. Books, novels, films, museums, plays, and other types of cultural artifacts are means by which societies act out cultural practices of remembrance, representation, and commemoration. They are also means by which we try to work through traumatic events like the Holocaust and other genocides, which unfortunately continue to be part of our human condition. Finally, I will take on Levy's challenge regarding monitoring and thinking critically about Holocaust representations, and I invite you to please do the same. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure there's some questions.
I'm happy to answer any questions. Has everybody seen Schindler's List?
How many people have seen Schindler's List? Okay, do you mind if I ask the question? How many of you read Anne Frank, The Diary of Anne Frank?
Have you thought about these issues with Schindler's List or with The Diary of Anne Frank?
Beth?
Well, I read an article, and I showed it to Maria, saying that it was about the Rwanda genocide, and survivors feel that prisoners of Rwanda is inaccurate, and that they aren't very pleased with films that are coming out about that.
I think that there's a mixed reaction, and it also depends upon which film you're talking about. And I would say that in terms of, let's say, Schindler's List, there are millions of stories out there, and I know that Spielberg has gone around and started taping Holocaust survivors. Actually, he's finished this larger project. But you have films like Life is Beautiful, which was very controversial among Holocaust circles. I know of Holocaust survivors that walked out of the film thinking that how can you make a comedy out of the Holocaust. I personally didn't have as much of a problem with Life is Beautiful as I did with Schindler's List. And for me, Life is Beautiful almost seemed like a love story between a father and a child. And it seemed like it was so farcical that it obviously was not a true story. What concerns me the most about Schindler's List is that it's filmed to be like a documentary. It's one story of the Holocaust. It's not even an accurate story. There's this meshing of fact and fiction. And I was in Krakow a couple of years ago where I was just astonished because there were signs up in Krakow saying this is where Schindler's List was filmed. Not this is where, there were transports to concentration camps, or this is the way to Treblinka, but they were making a whole industry out of the fact that Schindler's List was being filmed there, or had been filmed there. And there were books and pamphlets that you could purchase where you could walk around the city to see points where they did the filming. And so there's something troubling about that, where the depiction of the film, or the depiction of the Holocaust, is something that gets elevated and kind of a Hollywood industry of it, rather than the actual event itself. And that's what's troubling to me, and I think that's troubling to a lot of Holocaust survivors.
Just a comment, I was in Krakow this summer and was with some survivors. And one of the concerns was that the spaces have not been memorialized that are directly connected. So there's not a spot that has, this is where people were gathered together and marched to the camps. And there's very minimal foot signage as you enter the camp, other than to say something terrible happened here. But basically it's been turned into a park.
Do you recommend any films that you feel portray the Holocaust in a viewpoint accurately?
Well, I think Claude Lanzmann's Shoah is a good depiction of survivor testimony. And I would also say with Schindler's List, I'm not totally against the film because on the one hand, it brought up the consciousness of the Holocaust. And so more people are going to see a big blockbuster film like that, especially after it wins Academy Awards, and at least maybe begin a discussion about the Holocaust or think about it. But I think that in terms of the messages that it gives, it's really a story about rescue and survival, which is not the story of the Holocaust. I like Claude Lanzmann's film. It's a 9-hour documentary. I don't know whether you've seen it in this class. It's certainly very hard to watch, but it is actually the voices of survivors, where they talk about their experiences, and I think it's a very effective film.
I've told my classes about the gray zone.
The Gray Zone also. Yeah.
Has anybody in the 3 days since I mentioned it to you, has anybody seen the gray zone?
What is it?
The gray zone is taken from Primo Levi's essay in The Drowned and the Saved called The Gray Zone, and it is a depiction of the life, the short experience of people who were in the Sonderkommando, the people who were responsible for dealing with the people going into the gas chambers, and then also then taking people and putting them into the crematory.
What do you think of your rotary report?
I think Europa was supposedly based on a true story also. And it has some farcical elements in it. And I guess it doesn't disturb me as much as Schindler's List. And what do I think of it? I guess it's entertaining. It was not as controversial as Schindler's List. I guess I would say medium. I wouldn't use it as an educational tool. So I don't know if you're asking me about it as a movie to see or something that I would show in a Holocaust class. I wouldn't show it as an educational film. I think there are better films. I think it's better to look at documentaries or to open up scholarly books. So I'm not really sure how you're asking me the question.
I've heard of students with Berg's reactions to making the film before. Like you mentioned, as far as he felt like he witnessed it. I've heard that so many times, and I actually felt disgusted when he brought it up today, just because we for survivors and studying for past semester. Do you think, has anyone ever called into question on that, or is it sort of nuts? Also you made a great film. Does anyone have any problem with that?
Well, I think that one of the responses that he got to Schindler's List was that there are a lot of other stories, which is why he started to show a foundation to interview 50,000 survivors around the world, and he had a training group of people to find them. I can't really speak for Steven Spielberg. The Shoah Foundation is actually on the DreamWorks movie lot, and these people are Holocaust scholars, and they're very committed to what they're doing. And I actually think they're doing good work. And what they're in the process of doing is transcribing 50,000 interviews from various different languages, and they are making the data available. They're working with some Holocaust museums so that in the future, I mean, they're not there yet, but let's say in 10 years, you might be able to actually link onto a website and put in a word like Auschwitz or rape or torture or something, children surviving, and the data set would or should eventually be able to compile material from the interviews. There's been some criticism about how he's done the interviews and the training. So that Spielberg kind of has, he's also done kind of these educational sets about the Holocaust, and he kind of takes the Hollywood version of it, where it's almost like, what would I say, have you seen those websites where you can kind of punch something in and you'll get some interview material or data coming up, and rather than making it kind of country specific, it's almost like he uses the Hollywood model that gets exported to various countries around the world. And so there's been criticism from other countries about kind of this, I don't even know this video homogenization of kind of the storyline. And so there's been criticism in that respect, but I think that his response was, well, I'm going to go and collect all these other stories. But I'll tell you one other anecdote. I think a couple of years ago I was at a conference in Krakow, and I went to Auschwitz. It was not the first time that I was there. And there's some tours that you can take, and then you can walk around on your own. And there's actually 3 camps there. There's Auschwitz, and there's Birkenau 1, which is a women's camp, and then there was Birkenau 2. And I was in Birkenau, and there was a mother there with her 11-year-old child, and she was talking to her child, and she said, "Oh, see, this is just like how it was in Schindler's List." And rather than, it was using that metaphor really bothered me, because she was using Schindler's List to kind of educate her about what had taken place when she was actually at the site. And rather than saying this is what happened here, she was referring back to Schindler's List. And as the woman here had mentioned, that there aren't very many placards to say what happened here, but you can in Krakow take a tour of the sites that, where they'll go to the sites where they filmed Schindler's List. So this is what's being promoted, and I find that really irritating.
I don't have a question so much as I just sort of like to make a comment. I can appreciate you being an academic having some difficulty with what is being portrayed by Hollywood and some of the other groups. But I guess from my perspective, the idea of even Hollywood entertainment, and you didn't mention Hotel Rwanda and some of the other films, they bring focus to the issue. And it seems to me, by bringing focus, that's good. And then maybe out of that, maybe somebody will be impelled to go out and actually look at the real thing. Read books by Wiesel or Primo Levi and people like that. So I think focus, it's almost like half a loaf is not such a bad thing.
Yeah, no, you know what, I agree with you, and so there's an ambivalence there, because one thing that Schindler's List did do is it reached a large audience, and it reached a large audience around the world, and so it elevated the issue. And in that sense, I appreciate it, because more people are going to go out and see Schindler's List, especially with it being a Spielberg film and having won a lot of Academy Awards, and they're going to pick up Landsman Shoah or Night and Fog or some other more obscure Holocaust film. So I agree with you there. The issue that I have as a Holocaust scholar is, what is it that's really being portrayed there? And and the notion of rescue and survival, which is really the main storyline of Schindler's List, is not the story of the Holocaust, and that's what bothers me the most. I think that aspect of it. You know, the simplifications, the focusing on the family, or the focusing on the list. I mean, those are nice Hollywood techniques to draw you into a story, in the same way with Hotel Rwanda, but they're not the story. That to me is the most troubling. And when Schindler's List gets shown in Holocaust classes or in Holocaust education, there's actually even a Holocaust education packet that you can get that goes along with Schindler's List, and that being kind of considered the Holocaust film and the story of the Holocaust, that's when it really bothers me. So I appreciate what you say, and I actually agree with you on that. There's a function for that. But, you know, as a Holocaust educator, I want people to look at these things critically, and if it is being used in a class, then I want, you know, people to think about it critically. What's really being told here? What's the storyline here? And is that really the story of the Holocaust?
I just agreed never to ever show films like that in her classes.
Probably for that reason. I don't know.
It's shorthand for what happened, and not necessarily. But it is, shall we say, an introduction. Having seen Schindler, did that at least? Is it a placeholder for you when you study the Holocaust? That at least you know where you're starting out, or would you rather start out fresh with 9 hours of survivors' testimony?
I really appreciate your criticism of Schindler's List. It happens to be my favorite Holocaust movie. I've seen it about 15 times, so I know it reasonably well. I also appreciate Elie Wiesel's objection to any representation of the Holocaust. Having said that, since we're dealing with human beings, and since the Holocaust happened, there will be representation. Can't get away from that. About 10 years ago, I sat through this course 2 years in a row, and I've come back for leftovers many times, and I've done other ways of delving into the Holocaust. As a Nazi war child, I really don't have the luxury of choice. It's a matter of psychological survival. And in that sense, Schindler's List has been tremendously helpful to me. And the way I would qualify that whole issue of how trivialized should things not be, they will be trivialized. And my sense is one of the reasons they get trivialized is because there's one theme that I've consistently felt is being left out of the whole discussion of the Holocaust. And I'm familiar with that because I work with death and dying through hospice. So I'm around people who are dying and families who are close to the theme of death in a very personal way. And I see death being trivialized, even when it's right there in the house. And I think the reason that happens is because the issue of death is the most confronted issue we humans have. And I think that has been recognized and memorialized in one way or another in all cultures. And it has been said that the reason a dying person is confronted to us is because it's a mirror. It's a reminder that someday we'll be in that same situation. And since it's demonstrated that we have difficulty with that on a one-on-one basis, even in a very peaceful family scene, it's not surprising to me that being confronted with 6 million deaths is totally overwhelming. And that trivialization is a sad but normal reaction.
Andy, do you have anything?
Lynn, thanks for your talk. I wanted to pick up on an earlier exchange and then kind of the theme you raised in your talk about fact and fiction. And I'm curious especially about the final scene of the movie, which I think is still a scene with actors portraying real people. But I'm very interested in the way that it's shot and the use of intertitles that you commented on to appear to be like we've shifted now back into the world of color, and yet it looks like a documentary film. I was trying to figure out what makes this look real to me, not real like actors playing the role, but like this is somehow Spielberg got documentary footage of the Schindler survivors visiting Schindler's grave, and something about the kind of washed out color tones of the color and so forth. And I think there, I guess I'm inclined to agree with you about that scene in particular strikes me as dangerous because it blurs what is actual with what is a representation of the actual. And clearly there's interplay always between those two, but to have that be so thoroughly blurred here, we know as an audience that we've come out of the kind of representational mode signaled by the black and white, that now that looks like the real thing, like that it really is the person today or in the past who we saw depicted in the movie. I guess that's one area that makes me feel uncomfortable about what Spielberg is doing.
No, they are the real people, but it's bringing back they are the real people who the actors portrayed. So, and actually in Israel, when they showed the film in Israel, there was, I think, different music that was playing. They changed it around a little bit. But I think I think the fact that they are the actors that the people portrayed kind of make it, again, like see, we were presenting a real story, so I think it reinforces that image.
So the actor was walking with the real, okay, I didn't understand that.
They were both.
They were both. They were walking arm in arm with survivors of the people that they portrayed at the very end.
How many of you have seen The Pianist? How about that?
That's another controversial film, and that got a lot of controversy because it was seen as being a love story toward Poland and did not deal with Polish collaboration with the Nazis. And so that was very controversial in Holocaust circles, very controversial.
Okay. Join me in thanking